Hello, my name is Marty Jefferson, and I'm the Senior Technology Advisor for Collaboration here at Internet Work Engineering. I'd like to thank you for watching my updated video on Cisco's Webex calling. It's been a while since my last video, and a lot of things have changed. Don't worry, I'm going to go over every feature and interface from start to finish. I hope you find this useful. We will start with the administrative interface. In this section, I'll be showing you how the Webex Calling Administrative Portal Control Hub is laid out and where to find the different services and features. Control Hub is the single pane of glass I use to manage all the Webex services. Everything from user management to reporting to system configuration is done in Control Hub. To access Control Hub, I open my browser and enter https://admin.webex.com. When prompted, I enter my email address and password. The Control Hub interface is broken up into two main sections. In the center is the Overview section, or where the specific service or feature data is displayed. On the left is the Navigation section, where I can select the monitoring, management, or service I want to access. When I log into Control Hub, I will get announcements for any relative information I may need to know about. I can press the X to clear this window. In the upper right corner are the notification icon and the help icon. If there are any notifications for me related to the Webex services, a number will be displayed beside the bell icon. I can click on the bell to retrieve these notifications. The question mark icon is where I can look up how-to information or go to the Help Center for even more information. In the left frame of the browser page is where I can access all the services and features for all my Webex products. At the very top is the Overview option. This will display the system overview information in the center display. This is where the Control Hub starts when you first log in. The next option is the Alert Center. This is where I can create and manage custom alerts. I may want to be notified when certain conditions are met in the system. The next section is the Monitoring section. This is where I can run reports, monitor the configuration, and troubleshoot the different Webex products I have. The Webex Experience option shows me how well I have progressed in activating all the Webex features and offers suggestions on what I may want to activate next. Analytics is where I can see the utilization of the Webex products I have over time. This gives me keen insight into my user population's adoption of the products and where I may want to invest in training or some assistance. The troubleshooting option is great when you need to pinpoint an issue quickly. You can look at real-time statistics for historical and live meetings and calls. You can also see any activity the admins in your organization have completed. Reports are where I can pull up historical data for any of the Webex products. I can run reports ad hoc or schedule them to run routinely. The next section in the left browser frame is the Management section. This is where I can manage my users and workspaces. Workspaces are common areas like break rooms, conference rooms, and lobbies. I can also manage devices, apps, and my organization-wide settings. First, we will look at the Users option. Users are key pieces in Webex Calling. All settings and devices are tied to the users. There are several ways to get users into the system. I can enter the users manually, but for a large organization, that could take some time. Alternatively, I can either import the users from a CSV file, that's a comma-separated values file for those that are new to this stuff, or more commonly used is the directory synchronization option. Here I can connect to an on-premise Microsoft Active Directory or a cloud-based Azure AD. To view or modify a user, I click on the user in the list. This will bring up all of the options available for the user to be modified. The Profile tab shows all the user's current settings and license consumption. The General tab shows the user's calling behavior. This is how calls are processed when a user tries to make a call. This will override the system-wide settings. The Meetings tab shows the Webex meeting sites the user is associated with. By clicking on the site, I can modify the types of meetings the users can host and modify the user's privileges in the site. The Calling tab is where we will focus in this demo. This is where we modify the various calling configuration settings for the user. Directory number is where we assign an extension and/or a DID, a direct inward dial number, to the user. The call settings section is where we can view, modify things like voicemail access, call forwarding, call waiting, caller ID, emergency callback number. We will dive deeper into the advanced call settings later in the demo. The messaging tab is where we can view, modify the restrictions we can apply to a user in the messaging portion of the Webex app. These settings will override the system-wide settings. The Hybrid Services tab shows the different hybrid services the user is associated with. The Calendar service is for integrating Control Hub into either Microsoft Exchange, Office 365, or Google Calendar. The Message service is for integrating Webex Messaging, Cisco's cloud messaging platform, with the on-premises IM&P server, instant messaging and presence. Lastly, the Devices tab shows the different devices associated to a user and the software upgrade channel the device is on. There are 3 options for the upgrade channel. Default Stable. This channel is for fully tested production software loads. Preview. This channel allows a user to see new software before it is released to the wider user base. One that is not listed is the Beta channel. The system administrator must sign up for the Beta channel. Once they do, the end users can associate to the channel. The next option in the management section is workspaces. Workspaces are similar to users, but are used for devices not tied directly to an end user. Those would consist of things like conference room devices, break room, and lobby phones. As you can see, workspaces have some of the same configuration settings the users do. By clicking on the Call Settings option, I can see call forwarding, call waiting, caller ID, and the emergency callback number settings just like the users. One option missing in the workspace is the voicemail option. Workspaces cannot have a voicemail box. In the upper right corner is the Actions button. This is where you can edit the workspace or delete it altogether. When I click Edit, it brings up a dialog where I can enter the space name, the type of workspace it is, the capacity of the workspace. This setting can be important if you want to use the occupancy sensor on the Webex room kits to monitor the number of users in a conference room. You can set up alerts on the room kits to alert when the maximum capacity of the room is exceeded. On the image for the workspace, I can see 3 dots in the upper right corner. This is where I can upload an image of the workspace to give administrators an image of what the space actually looks like. The Devices option is where I can manage the devices registered to my organization. I can check the status of devices and even delete or issue new devices from here. When I click the Add Devices button in the upper right corner, I can choose if I want to add a device to a user or a workspace. Both are similar, but for the demo, I'm going to choose a user. I enter the user's name in the dialog box, then I choose what type of device I am associating to the user. Lastly, I choose how I'm going to tell Control Hub how to recognize the device for the first time. I can choose MAC address if I know the MAC and I know the user either has the device or knows how to get that exact device. If I don't know either of those, I can choose the activation code option. This will generate an activation code I can then give to the user. They can pick up any phone, connect it, and enter the activation code to tell Control Hub this is the device to associate to the user. If I want to see the status of a device, I can click on the device and a window flies out from the right. I can scroll down to examine the status, reboot the device, or delete it. Back in the Devices page, there are several tabs across the top of the page. The Templates tab allows me to create templates for commonly installed devices. I can create different templates for different configurations. The Settings tab allows me to activate and deactivate several options and third-party integrations supported by Webex Calling. The Software tab is where I can see those software upgrade channels I spoke about earlier. I can see where the deployment cycle is, see information about the different software loads, and get the release notes for them. In the Management tab, I can choose how I want upgrades to be sent to my devices. I can set it to automatic or set up my own schedule. The My Alerts tab is where I can activate and deactivate alerts to notify me when my devices change state or encounter issues. The Resources tab has links to different software options I may need to deploy for interconnections to on-premise systems. The next option in the Management section is the Apps option. The Apps option is where I can control the different apps or bots I want to allow or disallow into my organization. I can also upload new skills for the Webex Assistant to learn. The Account option is where I can view, modify my organization name and see my organization ID. This can be important when I'm troubleshooting an issue with Cisco. I can also see what subscriptions are linked to my Control Hub organization, what licenses are in those subscriptions, how many licenses are consumed, and when they expire. The Organization Settings option is where I can activate or deactivate any common setting for all the users or devices in my organization. These are things like SSO, Single Sign-On, which allows me to link my Control Hub users to a corporate directory for user authentication. The users then only have one login for both corporate and Control Hub access. The next section we will discuss is the Services section. This is where I find all the different Webex services I have access to. The first option in this section is the Updates and Migrations option. Updates and migrations are task-based cards to assist me with things like updating the firmware on my phone to the MPP firmware required for Webex calling, to migrating my users from the Jabber application to the Webex app. The next option is the Messaging option. This is where I can activate or deactivate the different settings for the Webex messaging service. I can also create restrictions for whom my users can message with in the Webex app. The Meeting option is where I can modify the settings of my Webex Meetings site and see the usage of the site. The Calling option is where I configure all the Webex calling settings and features. I will come back to this option in a few seconds. The Contact Center option is where I set up and configure the Webex Contact Center for my organization. The Connected UC option is where I configure the integration of my on-premises Unified Communications Manager to Control Hub for reporting and future management services. Last but not least is the Hybrid Services option. Hybrid services are used to integrate Control Hub with other services like Office 365, Google Calendar, on-premise Exchange Server, and more. Now let's get back to the calling option, since that's what this demo is all about. The calling option is where I do all the Webex calling configuration. The Numbers tab is where I set up the DID, direct inward dial numbers, to be used for the users, workspaces, and the different features of the Webex calling. If a number is not in the Numbers database, it cannot be assigned to a user, workspace, or feature. The Location tab is for setting up locations. Locations are groupings of users and workspaces with common settings and requirements. Locations are where I can set up calling restrictions for different groups. Some of these settings can be overridden at the user level should there be a need for an exception. The Call Routing tab is used to set up a more sophisticated call routing scheme should the standard call routing scheme not be sufficient. This is mainly used when I'm integrating Webex calling with an on-premise PBX like Cisco Unified Communications Manager. I can set up trunks, which are then added to route groups where different dial plans are used to route calls. Next is the Features tab. This is the heart of Webex calling. Here is where I can configure the various features which make Webex calling perform the task required by the customer. The Auto Attendant allows me to build call handling options. The Call Park features allow me to configure different ways for users to transfer calls to other users. The Call Pickup feature allows users to answer another user's ringing device. The Call Queue feature allows me to create numbers for customers to call into and have a group of users answer the calls while they are held in place by the system. The DEC network is used to create a wireless phone network outside of the Wi-Fi network. Hunt groups are similar to call queues, but the callers are not held in the system if there are no users to answer the calls. Single number reach is the ability to have a user's cell phone or home phone ring when they receive a call on their Webex calling number. Group paging allows me to configure a group of up to 75 devices that can receive broadcast announcements from designated devices in the system. The Receptionist Client is a browser-based attendant console app that allows receptionists or assistants to take incoming calls and route them easily in a drag-and-drop interface. The virtual extensions allow me to configure extensions in the system for individuals or companies outside the system that can be displayed and dialed from the system directory. And finally, voicemail groups allow me to configure voicemail boxes not specifically assigned to a user. This could be a voicemail box tied to a hunt group or a call queue, for example. The Service Settings tab allows me to view and modify the various call settings available in Webex Calling. The Client Settings tab allows me to view and modify the various client settings for the Webex app. The other portal for Webex Calling is the end-user interface. In this section, I will show you how the end users can access many of the Webex Calling settings from the Cisco Calling User portal. In Webex Calling, the end users have access to a lot of their settings in their own interface. This can offload much of the day-to-day operational tasks from the IT staff to the end user. To access it, I open my browser and enter https://settings.webex.com. I log in with my username and password from Control Hub. If my organization is using SSO, single sign-on, I will be redirected to the corporate IDP, identity provider server, and I can use my corporate credentials to log in. In the settings interface, I have access to modify a lot of the settings in my user profile in Control Hub. As long as the feature is enabled on my account, I will have access to it in the settings interface. Foremost on this page is the ability for me to reset my voicemail PIN should I need to. If I want to access the other settings in Webex Calling, I click on the Webex Calling tab. Today, this will cross-launch me into the Cisco Calling User Portal, or CUP, but in the future, these options will be incorporated into the settings interface. Once in CUP, I can manage my voicemails and change my voicemail settings. When I click on the voicemail settings button, I get access to my settings. From here, I can disable the service if I want. I can manage when calls are sent to my voicemail box. I can change where my voicemail messages are stored. I can set up external notifications to alert me when I get a voicemail or even send a copy of the message to my email. I can manage my voicemail greetings from this page. In the upper right corner of the page, I can see the extension assigned to me, and by clicking on the down arrow icon, I can see my account settings and modify some of them. On the left side of the page is the navigation frame. This is where I can select the other feature options available to me. By clicking on the call history option, I can view my top 20 incoming, outgoing, and missed calls. By clicking on the call settings option, I get access to all the Webex Calling features enabled for me in Control Hub. In call settings, I can view and modify all of my Webex Calling features, like single number reach, call forwarding, call waiting, and more. I can set up schedules for features like call notification, simultaneous ring, sequential ring, selective call forward, and more. Under additional features is where I can enable and disable call barge in, caller ID blocking, and sign in and out of hoteling devices. The directory option gives me access to the organization directory from Control Hub. I can search the directory and place calls from it. The last option is the My Apps option. Here I can download the various desktop, mobile, and tablet apps for Webex Calling. Now that we have a good feel for how the administrative and end-user interfaces are laid out, let's start looking at how Webex Calling features work. In this section, I'll show you how to set up a call queue and monitor its usage. Call queuing in Webex Calling is not the same as a fully capable contact center. It has limited capabilities for processing the held call, and reporting is very rudimentary. However, it can be very useful if used in the proper application. I accessed the Call Queue feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. The Call Queue configuration is in the Features tab of the calling section. To create a new call queue, I click on the Create Call Queue button in the upper right. This will open a new dialog box where I can configure the call queue. The first option is the location. Here I pick the location I want the call queue to be in from the drop-down list. Next, I give the call queue a name. The call queue can have an externally accessible number, DID, or it can only have an internal extension. It must always have an extension, but a DID is not required. I'm going to give this call queue a DID for this demo. I can limit the number of calls allowed in the call queue. This can be useful to prevent any one call queue from utilizing all of the PSTN connections and starving out the other services. Next, I set up the caller ID. This is used for when calls are forwarded out of the call queue. I can also select the language used for the system default prompts. Each call queue can have a different language assigned. The new dialog box is where I configure how the calls are routed to the users. There are 5 options. Circular, which cycles through the users starting with the last user to take a call. Top down, which sends calls to the users in order from the top for every call. Longest idle, which sends calls to the user based on how long the user's phone has been idle. This is the most commonly used option. Weighted, which sends calls to users based on the weight assigned to them. Simultaneous, which sends calls to all the users at once. This is also commonly referred to as broadcast. For this demo, I'm going to choose longest idle. The next dialog box allows me to configure what happens to the call when the queue is full. This is referred to as overflow handling. I can choose what the caller hears when overflow happens. We can also choose to forward the call to another destination should overflow happen. This could be another call queue, a hunt group, or a group voicemail box. I can also enable a timer to activate the overflow process. Rather than sending a caller to the overflow when the queue is full, this will send the caller to the overflow process based on how long they have been in the call queue. I can also configure an announcement to be played to the caller when the overflow process is triggered. The next dialog box is where I configure the announcements I want to play to the callers. The first is the welcome message. This will play a welcome message to the callers when they first enter the queue. I can make this message mandatory if I always want the message to play, even if there are available users to take the call. I can use the standard message or record a custom one. The next option is the estimated wait message. This option can play a message to the caller telling them how long the system estimates their wait time will be. Alternatively, I can play the caller position in queue rather than the estimated wait time. I can also configure the system to play a high volume message when the caller's position in queue is higher than the maximum queue limit. The comfort message can be configured to play at a set interval to let the caller know their call is still being processed. The last option on this dialog box is the hold music. This plays music to the caller when no other message is being played. I can upload my own hold music should I wish, or use the default. In the next dialog box, I add the users responsible for processing the calls out of the call queue. Any user or workspace in the system can be a call agent in the queue. Depending on the call routing option I choose, the order I add the users to this list can be important. If, for example, I chose top-down as my call routing option, the system would then send calls to the first user I add here and cycle down the list until it finds an available user. I can also allow multiple calls to users. This can be problematic for users since they would have to put one call on hold to answer the second call. The next dialog box is the review page. Here I do a final review of the configuration before I create the call queue. I can always go back into the call queue configuration to make changes in the future. Once I review the configuration, I click the Create button and the call queue is created. Now that we've created a call queue, let's see how it works. I'll place a call into the pilot number of the call queue. Since there is a user available in the call queue, my call is routed directly to them. Notice the first call comes into the phone in the center. Now I'll place a second call into the call queue. Notice this time the call is routed to the phone on the left. This is the standard behavior of the longest idle call routing configuration. Users can remove themselves from the call queue should they need to leave their desk. They can press the DND, Do Not Disturb button on the phone to exit the queue. Notice when I place a third call into the call queue, the left phone rings instead of the center phone, which is the more idle phone. With any call queue, I always want to monitor and report on the queue usage. To do this with call queues, I click on the View Reports button. Today, this will cross-launch me into the Calling Administration Portal, or CAP, but in the future, this will be integrated into Control Hub. Once I'm in CAP, I choose the queue stats from the drop-down, then choose the location I put the call queue in. I can then choose the call queue I want to report on. Then I choose the date-time range I want the report to include. I'm going to stay with today for the demo. Then I click the arrow to run the report. In the report, I can see the DID number and extension for the call queue. The hold time column shows the total time callers were on hold in the system. The call time column is the total time users spent both holding and talking to users. Call abandoned shows how many times callers disconnected before reaching a user from the call queue. The average duration of abandon indicates the average time callers waited in queue before they disconnected. The average wait time shows the average time callers were held in queue while waiting for a user to become available. Lastly, the calls answered shows how many calls in the call queue were answered by the users. These are all based on historical data. By clicking on the Calls Currently in Queue button, I can see how many calls are in the queue now. So that was the call queue feature. Now let's dive into our next topic. In this section, I will demo the hunt group feature. In this section, I will show you how to create a hunt group and how the feature works. I'm always asked what the difference is between a call queue and a hunt group. This is a very good question. A call queue allows a caller to be held in the system for a set amount of time when there are no users available to process their call. Different messages and hold music can be played back to the caller while they are on hold. A hunt group plays ringing back to the caller while they wait for a user to become available. I can't play any messages or hold music to the caller while they are waiting. There are also no reports for hunt groups or the ability to see how many callers are waiting. I access the Hunt Group feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. The Hunt Group configuration is in the Features tab of the Calling section. To create a new Hunt Group, I click on the Create Hunt Group button in the upper right. This will open a new dialog box where I can configure the Hunt Group. The first thing you'll notice is the Hunt Group configuration has most of the same settings as the call queue. This first dialog page is exactly the same. I'm using the same number as the call queue since I have a limited number of DIDs in my system. The next dialog box is the call routing box. It is very similar to the call queue configuration with the same routing options. Notice the advanced after set number of rings switch at the bottom of the page. This option allows you to set the number of rings a call will ring on a user's device before the system automatically advances to the next user in the list. For this demo, I'm going to choose the simultaneous ring call routing option. The routing settings dialog box allows me to configure how the system will behave when the users are busy or not at their desk, or there are network issues causing user connectivity difficulties. Just like the call queue agent selection dialog box, this page allows me to choose which users are going to process calls out of the hunt group. The next dialog box is the review page. Here I do a final review of the configuration before I create the hunt group. I can always go back into the hunt group configuration to make changes in the future. Once I review the configuration, I click the Create button. Let's look at how the hunt group I just created works. I'll place a call into the pilot number of the hunt group. Notice all the phones ring at the same time. When I answer the call on one phone, the other phone stops ringing. Now I'll place a second call into the hunt group. Notice this time the call is routed to the phone on the left. This is because the center phone is still on the first call. Just like call queues, users can remove themselves from the hunt group should they need to leave their desk. they can press the DND, Do Not Disturb button on the phone to exit the group. Notice when I place a third call into the hunt group, only the left phone rings instead of all phones. This is normal behavior when a user is in Do Not Disturb. 2 down and more to come. In the next topic, I will demonstrate the Call Park feature in Webex Calling. In this section, I will show how to create a Call Park extension and how the feature works. Call Park allows a user to place a call on hold from one device, then retrieve the call from another device. Webex Calling has 2 different types of Call Park extensions and Call Park groups. Call Park groups allow users to park a call on a user's extension. The user can then retrieve the call when they are ready. Call Park extensions are groups of numbers users can park calls against. Other users can then retrieve the call on any device using the Call Park extension number. Yes, it does seem backwards. In this demo, I will be configuring a Call Park extension. I access the Call Park feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. The Call Park extension configuration is in the Features tab of the Calling section. Call Park extensions are set up per location. Each location can have its own group of numbers, or the same numbers can be used across all locations. To create a new Call Park extension, I click on the Create Call Park Extension button in the upper right. This will open a dialog box where I can configure the Call Park extension. First, I choose how I want to create the extensions. I can enter them manually one at a time, or create a CSV file to upload them into the system. For this demo, I'm going to choose the manual process. For each Call Park extension in the location, I give it a name and an extension. I repeat this process for each extension I want to create. I then click the Save button. Now that I have some Call Park extensions created, let's see how they work. First, I place a call from one phone to another and answer the call. I then press the More soft key on the phone until I see the Park soft key. I press the Park soft key and enter one of the Call Park extensions. On another phone, I press the More soft key until I see the Unpark soft key. I press the Unpark soft key, then enter the Call Park extension to retrieve the call. If for any reason the call is not retrieved in a set amount of time, the call will be presented back to the user's device that parked the call. The Call Park feature has a companion called Call Pickup. My next section is about the Call Pickup feature. In this section, I will show how to configure the Call Pickup feature and how it works. The Call Pickup feature is the ability for one user to answer the ringing device of another user. I access the Call Pickup feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. Call Pickup configuration is in the Features tab of the Calling section. Like the Call Park feature, the Call Pickup feature is configured on a per location basis. The first thing I must do is choose the location I want to configure the Call Pickup feature in. To create a new Call Pickup group, I click on the Create Call Pickup button in the upper right. This will open a dialog box where I can configure the Call Pickup group. In the dialog box, I give the Call Pickup group a name, then assign the users associated with this Call Pickup group. Once I have this configured, I click the Create button. Now that I have a Call Pickup group created, let's see how it works. From one phone, I place a call to one of the phones in the Call Pickup group. While the phone is ringing, I press the More soft key until I see the Group Pickup soft key. I press the Group Pickup soft key and the call is then connected to the phone. I can also use the Pickup soft key to answer other extensions not in the group. Now that I know how to answer the different types of calls presented in Webex Calling, let's see how I can direct the callers to the appropriate users. In this section, I will show how to configure an auto attendant and how it works. Auto attendants are used to offload some of the tasks normally accomplished by receptionists. It gives callers different options to reach designated users in the system. I access the Auto Attendant feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. The auto attendant configuration is in the Features tab of the Calling section. Like the call, park, and pickup features, the auto attendant feature is configured on a per location basis. To create an auto attendant, I click on the Create Auto Attendant button in the upper right. This will open a new dialog box where I can configure the auto attendant. The first thing I must do is choose the location in which I want the auto attendant to be configured. Next, I give the auto attendant a name. Auto attendants can have externally accessible DIDs or just an extension, but they must always have an extension. I can also choose the language the standard prompts will use. This can be different from auto attendant to auto attendant. The caller ID is used when the auto attendant transfers a call out. The next dialog box is the schedule box. This is where I can configure a schedule for the auto attendant to play either an open message and menu or a closed message and menu. The holiday page is the next dialog box. This is where I can configure the holidays for the auto attendant. When a holiday date is active, the auto attendant will play the closed message and menu. The menu page is where I can configure the actions the auto attendant will perform based on the key pressed by the caller. I can have different menus based on the schedule chosen previously. In the greetings page, I can configure the announcements or messages I want the caller to hear when they access this auto attendant. I can keep the default greeting if that fits my purpose, but normally I will record a custom greeting informing the caller of the options available to them in the menu. Just like the menu page, I can have a separate greeting for open hours and closed hours. The last page is the review page. Just like the other features, this is where I do a final review of the configuration before I create the auto attendant. Also, just like the other features, I can always edit the configuration once it is created. Once I review the configuration, I click the Create button. Now that I have an auto attendant created, let's see how it works. From one of the phones, I call the pilot number for the auto attendant. While the message is playing, I select from the options. Notice when I press 0 for the operator, the call is transferred to the operator. So far, I have configured call park, call pickup, and auto attendants. But now I need to be able to let someone know they have a call on hold. This is where the paging feature comes into play. In this section, I will show how to configure the paging feature and how it works. Paging in Webex Calling is done over the IP phones connected to the system. External paging systems can be integrated with Webex Calling, but we are only going to focus on the IP phone paging in this demo. I access the paging feature back in Control Hub in the Calling Services section. The paging configuration is in the Features tab of the Calling section. Like Call Park, Call Pickup, and Auto Attendant features, the paging feature is configured on a per location basis. To create a new paging group, I click on the Create Paging Group in the upper right. This will open a new dialog box where I can configure the paging group. The first thing I must do is choose the location in which I want the paging group to be created. Next, I give the paging group a name. Just like the other features, the paging group can have an externally accessible DID and an extension. It must always have an extension though. Also, just like other features, I can choose the language the standard prompts will use. The caller ID is used when a page is initiated. I can choose to send the page group's caller ID or the caller ID of the originating user. I associate the users where I want the paging announcements to be played in the paging target section. I am limited to 75 users in the paging target list. In the paging originator page, I associate the users I want to permit to initiate pages. If a user is not in this list, they cannot initiate a page. Like all the previous features, the last page is the review page. This is where I can do a final review of the configuration before I create the paging group. Also, just like the other features, I can always edit the configuration once it is created. Once I review the configuration, I click the Create button. Now that I have a paging group configured, let's see how it works. I must initiate the page from the Hotel Cube phone since it was the user I added to the paging originator list. I call the paging group number. A message is played on the target phones indicating a page is about to be played.
Paging.
On the paging originator phone, a message is played indicating I can start speaking the page.
Paging system ready.
Test page. Once the page originator ends the call, paging is terminated on the target phones. Now I've shown how I can distribute calls and notify users of held calls. Next, I'll show you how Webex Calling handles a live operator. In this section, I'll show you how to configure the receptionist client and how it works. The Receptionist Console is a browser-based application capable of operating on almost any operating system. The first thing I must do is grant the receptionist role to the user. To do this, I go to the Users option in the Management section. I click on the user I want to grant the receptionist role to, then click on the Calling tab. Next, I click on the Advanced Calling Settings option. To grant the role to the user, I click on the Receptionist Client option and click the slider. From the drop-down box, I can choose the other users this user can monitor from the Receptionist Console. The next step in the process is creating a call queue for the receptionist and assigning them to it. I've already created the receptionist call queue, so let's add the user to the queue. Once I'm in the call queue, I click on the Agents option to add the user to the queue. Now that I have the receptionist role assigned to a user and the receptionist call queue created, let's see how it works. First, let's take a look at the receptionist console itself. The call control box is used to display information about the incoming call or to place outgoing calls. The user can also answer and end the call from here. The conference box is used to display any information about conference calls the receptionist is part of. The queued calls box displays information about the calls in the receptionist queue. It will display the calling number and calling name if provided, as well as how long the call has been in the queue. The contacts session has several tabs, allowing the receptionist to quickly look up and organize their contacts. These can be used to quickly transfer calls to the other users on the system simply by dragging and dropping them on the user. Remember the users I set up to be monitored by the receptionist? Here is where the system will display the busy idle status of their users' devices. The Settings link allows the user to customize the receptionist console to fit their personal style and requirements. I focused most of my attention on how I can route calls to the users in the system. Now let's focus a little on how users can manage their own calls. In this section, I'll show you how line sharing works. There is no configuration required for line sharing. Line sharing is a native feature in Webex Calling. Since all the configuration is done at the user level, any user configuration is automatically applied to any device associated to the user. Here I have a phone and the Webex app running on a Mac set up for the user. No other configuration is required for line sharing. Notice when I place a call to the user's extension, both devices ring and I can answer the call on either device. I can also move the call between the devices if I wish. If the call is terminated on the Webex app, I can press the Call Pull soft key on the phone to automatically pull the call from the app to the IP phone. I can do the same thing from the Webex app, but since the app doesn't have soft keys, I must use the feature code to pull the call. To pull the call back to the Webex app, I open the calling interface, and in the dial pad, I enter *11 and press return. Most users today are highly mobile, working from both in the office and out of the office. Let's see how Webex Calling solved this mobile issue. In this section, I'll show how to configure the mobile app for the users and how it works. The mobile app for Webex Calling is the Webex app. Users can download the app from the Apple App Store or the Android Google Play. The Webex app is a great collaboration app. It supports messaging, meeting, and calling all in one application. In this demo, we will focus on the calling aspect of the app. The only mobile app specific setting in Control Hub is in the client settings of the calling section. Here I can set the default behavior of the app, but the users can override these settings if they wish. The call settings configures what numbers are presented in the app when the users click on a contact to place a call to them. The in-call experience setting configures how the app will behave when an incoming call is received. Now let's take a look at how the mobile app works. The mobile app is tied to the user's Control Hub login. When the user logs into the Webex app, it will contact Control Hub and configure the options the user is entitled to. Here I see the messaging interface in the Webex app. To get to the calling interface, I click on the calling icon at the bottom. In the calling interface, I get a list of all of my recent calls, missed calls, contacts, and voicemails. If I want to make a call, I can either click on one of the calls in the list or click on the dial pad in the upper right corner. When I click on the avatar of one of the contacts, I am presented with options to initiate a call via audio or video. The mobile app is great, but it does run over the cellular data network. Some users may not want this due to data consumption on their service. Webex Calling has an alternative method for reaching the mobile device. In this section, I'll show how to configure the single number reach feature and how it works. Single number reach works like the Webex app, except it uses the cellular voice network rather than the data network. When users call my Webex calling number, either the extension or the DID, the system will also call the number I have configured for single number reach. This could be my cell phone, but it could be any PSTN accessible number. The single number reach configuration is done on the user's account. The administrators can configure single number reach for the user, but the user can also do it themselves. For this demo, I'm going to focus on the end user method of configuring single number reach. To configure single number reach, I log into the end user portal at https://settings.webex.com. Once logged in, I click on the Webex calling link. This will cross-launch me into the calling user portal or CUP. Once in CUP, I click on the call settings link in the left frame. To enable single number reach, I click on the slider beside the option. I can enable contact calling from the directory tab if I wish. To add the number I want the system to contact me on, I click the Add Another Personal Number link. I give the number a name I can identify it by, then enter the number. I can also enable other options like Do Not Forward Calls. This prevents call forwarding to personal numbers if it is also configured. The answer confirmation option requires the user to press a key to confirm the call connection once they have answered the call on the personal device. The Enable Feature Codes option gives the user access to call control feature codes in Webex Calling like Call Hold, Call Park, and Call Transfer. Now that I have single number reach configured, let's see how it works. I place a call into the user's number configured for single number reach. This can be the user's extension or DID. Notice the user's phone rings first. The call takes a few seconds to get to the external device due to cellular network call processing delays. I often must increase the number of rings the system uses before sending the call to the Webex Calling voicemail because of this delay. Once the cellular network finds the device, the phone also rings. Just like with line sharing, if I answer the call on the mobile device, I can pull the call back to my IP phone by pressing the Call Pull soft key. I've addressed how users can manage their calls when they're out of the office. Now let's focus on how these remote users can access Webex Calling resources when they return to the office. In this section, I will show how to configure hot desking and how it works. Hot desking is the ability for a user to walk into a cubicle or desk and move their Webex Calling configuration to the desk. This is also known as hoteling. These terms are used interchangeably in Webex Calling but refer to the same process. The first thing I must do is enable the phone in the shared cubicle as a hot desking device. Hot desking devices can only be in a workspace. Users cannot be hot desking hosts. To do this, I go into the Workspaces option in the Management section. In the workspace, to enable hot desking, I click on the Configurations tab. Clicking on the Hot Desking button enables it. Notice I cannot have calendaring and hot desking on the same workspace. Now that I have the hot desk device enabled, I must enable hoteling for the end user. To do this, I click on the Users option in the Management section. In the User's Calling configuration, under the Advanced Calling option, there is a hoteling option. I click the slider to enable hoteling for the user. Once the feature is enabled for the user, they can log in and out of hot desking hosts when in the office. The users can log into the device from the phone, but this can be cumbersome given the user's ID is their email address and the keypad on the phone uses the T9 method for spelling. The simplest way for users to log into the device is via their computer. To log in via the computer, I log into the end user portal and click on Webex Calling. In CUP, I click on Call Settings, then the Additional Features tab. To log into the device, I click the Hoteling slider and enter the name or extension of the device in the search box. From the search list, I choose the device I want to log into and click Save. Notice when I click Save, the extension on the device changes to be my extension. So far, I have looked at how to route calls to users and how users can manage those calls. Now I will show how a user can monitor the lines of another user in order to see if they are on a call or not. In this section, I will show how to configure line monitoring and how it works. Line monitoring is the ability for one user to see the state of another user's line. This can be useful for assistants to monitor the lines of managers they work for. This is also referred to as busy lamp field. Monitoring is configured on the end user. To do this, I click on the Users option in the Management section. From the Users page, I click on the Calling tab, then the Advanced Call Settings option. Then I click on the Monitoring option. Here I configure the user lines I want this user to monitor or the call park extensions I want the user to monitor. I can also have the system notify the user when calls are parked on the monitored lines. Notice when I click the Save button, the lines appear on the user's device. Now we can see how line monitoring works since it has been configured. Notice when one of the monitored lines makes or receives a call, the corresponding line on the user's device indicates the state of the line. Green means the line is idle. Flashing red means the line is ringing. Red means the line is in use. The lines can also be used as a speed dial button to the monitored line. The last topic we will cover in this demo is call recording. In this section, I'll show how to configure call recording and how it works. Call recording is native to Webex Calling. The service is provided by Dubber, but is included in the cost of the user license. Like most of the other features in Webex Calling, call recording is configured on the end user. To do this, I click on the User option in the Management section. On the User's page, I click on Calling, then Advanced Call Settings, and finally on Call Recording. To activate call recording for the user, I simply click the slider. I can then choose how I want the user to be recorded. Never obviously means the user will never be recorded. On demand means the user is given the option to start and stop recording during the call. Always means the user is always recorded and they cannot pause the recording. Always with pause resume means the user can pause and resume the recording. This is useful if the user is taking personal information from the caller. The play recording announcement allows the system to play a short announcement to all parties indicating the call is being recorded. The record voice messages option does just that. It will not only record the calls a user gets, but will also record any voice messages they receive. The recording tone reminder allows the system to play an audible tone at the interval specified to all parties on the call to remind them they are being recorded. The last option is used to show the platform information used by Webex Calling and Dubber to establish the connection between the user's Webex Calling account and their Dubber account. It also provides a browser URL for users to access their call recordings. Now that call recording is enabled, let's see how it works. When a user receives a call, depending on how their call recording is configured, the call may begin recording from the start or require the user to initiate the recording. This user is configured for on-demand recording, so I am required to initiate the recording. To do this, I press the More soft key until I see the Record soft key. When I press the soft key, notice a little red icon appears on the phone display. This is to let me know the call is being recorded. Once the call ends, I can log into the Dubber user portal and manage the call. I can play the recording, email the recording, or download the recording to my storage device. This brings us to the end of my updated demonstration of Webex Calling. I want to thank you again for watching, and I hope you have found it useful.